Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMV Business Show. I'm your host, Otto Sevilla, and today I have a very special guest for you, Brendan Hines-Ike, star defender for the professional soccer club DC United. Welcome to the show, Brendan.
Thanks, Otto. Good to be here.
Thank you. So I know you're originally not from the DMV area. Where are you from?
Born and raised in Littleton, Colorado. Was born in 1994. So used to think I was one of the younger people in this industry, but I've seen how young the soccer industry is now. So a lot of 2000 babies and whatnot. But yeah, so originally from Littleton, Colorado. Grew up with an older brother, younger sister, my mom and dad, and they still have the same house there today, same address, and yeah, I've been everywhere. I've gone to many different states and countries for soccer. It's kind of taking me everywhere. I'm sure we'll dive into that, but yeah, originally from Littleton.
Okay, I can't wait to get into all that. So you're the middle of the three then.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and you said Middleton, Colorado.
Littleton.
Littleton. Sorry.
Yes.
So, what would you say? I guess what's the major city close to Littleton?
Denver. It's about 20 minutes outside of Denver. So.
Oh, okay. So just a suburb of Denver.
It is. We grew up going skiing in the Rocky Mountains. Vail, Colorado, and Aspen were about an hour and a half away when skiing didn't used to be so astronomically expensive. And yeah, we'd have lots of soccer tournaments up in the mountains, or we'd have them in the Denver region. And yeah, no, I mean it's a great outdoor area. It's very much for people who like to be doing hiking and running and whatnot. So
Yeah,
we grew up doing all that kind of stuff.
I have a good friend here in the area, and she loves Colorado, and she's all about outdoors and all the different outdoor activities you can do. I think that's her dream place to move to one day.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's booming now with all the people that have moved there, so it's a little bit more expensive than it used to be, 30 years ago, but it's still a beautiful area. So, and you get all four seasons, which is great.
Yeah, definitely. So, growing up in Colorado, besides soccer, what were you into as a child?
The other sports that I played, the only other sport I played was basketball, and
Oh,
I was
really?
no good. It's different with your hands and your feet, but I just liked having as something else to play. No, we were soccer all year round. That was our family. I mean, my older brother was one of the best players in the nation, and he was always the best player in Colorado at his age group. So it was kind of a person I had to look up to and try to aspire to be like. And then I had a younger sister who was also a star soccer player. So, it kind of ran in the family, and yeah, we were constantly doing tournaments and traveling. And I mean, yeah, tons and tons of road trips that my parents made and sacrifices to be able to have our soccer weekends fulfilled. But when we were very young, we did other things, like I said, outdoors that involved skiing. Up in the mountains, we'd go up there for a week and do skiing, and we got involved in tennis and golf and a couple other things. But yeah, it was pretty much soccer all the time, out back practicing, and yeah, juggling the ball in the garage, and it was what we did to fill our time. Really, it's been our life for me for 27 years now. But yeah, it was how I filled most of my day, if not my whole day, usually.
I was going to ask you next. Do you remember the first time you picked up the soccer ball?
I don't remember the first time, but I vaguely remember really starting to enjoy having a soccer ball at my feet. Probably when I was like 4 or 5. I just remember kind of being in my backyard and juggling and trying to juggle. I could only juggle like one or two times, but I'd juggle it and catch it and juggle it and catch it. And I started to just have this fascination with what it was like to kick something and then catch it and then kick it two times and catch it. And so my eye foot coordination was just something that really got me going and inspired me more and more to try to get better at it, I guess, because my eye hand coordination wasn't that good. So I thought, okay, maybe I can do something with my eye foot coordination. And I just kind of started to love it more and more. And my parents are great about it. We had a decent sized backyard, but my dad used to put little, they call them 3v3 goals, because it's for when you have 3v3 teams. They're smaller goals than normal, and we used to put them up in the back, and I'd play with my brother and sister, or I'd play with myself back there, and pretend I was certain players and run around and shoot and score and bring the ball back. And So yeah, it was how I basically spent my whole weekend. And day after I finished from school, I would come home and be in the back kicking the ball. And as long as, I mean, until I moved to other places for soccer, that's as much as I can remember from my childhood is those backyard kicking rounds.
How much older is your older brother?
He's 3 years older than I am,
Okay.
so it was a perfect age for us once we got to about, I'd say I was about the age of 8 or 9, him being 12 or 13, depending, or yeah, 11. It was starting to be better because I could somewhat hold my own with him,
Yes.
and not just be kind of the guy who was a little bit smaller. And but I used to play up with his team when we play indoor. I used to play up with his team. I wouldn't play a lot. I would kind of just be there on the bench because my dad would coach the team, and
Okay.
I would just kind of be there as, like, they called it a super sub. So if they
Okay.
needed anyone to go inside for any position, I was there. And I remember briefly going into a game in indoor, and I had to fill in as goalkeeper because nobody else was there. And so here was me, a little 8-year-old in the goal with the 11 or 12-year-olds playing, and scared out of my mind, and my brother would come and just try to console me and say it's all right. And, which made it better because he was like the star of the team. So it was
Okay.
not like it was just another guy. It was, everything was kind of revolved around him. So yeah, I always grew up basically trying to be similar to him, or match as much as I could with him. But it was almost impossible because he was such a good player.
You mentioned all three of you played soccer and your dad coached. I'm curious, Brendan, was your dad and mom, were they also into soccer growing up or when they were younger?
No, well, my mom has no athleticism at all. That just doesn't run in her family. She's a cheerleader on the side. She just likes to be there and support, and she's the best at it. So she was always there to support us at all the games, and that was her best role. My dad was a runner. He was a very good um, track runner. He did relay races. He did the mile. He did hurdles. He was very, very good, and he has a few records still at some of the competitions. At least he likes to think so. Maybe something has changed since then, but um, he started to get into soccer more and more when he was playing up in New Jersey. And that's kind of only where they had soccer going back in the day. He actually was there when Pele came over, and Pele was briefly playing with the Cosmos. He'd come over just for, like, I don't know if it was for some media stuff or whatever, and my dad got to basically be across from him and kicked around the ball with him. And I think that's when he started to fall in love with the sport because it was kind of untouched territory in the United States 50 years ago. I mean,
Yes.
M.L.S obviously wasn't even created yet. And so he never went anywhere with it. But I think when we started really young and he saw right away that we had the ability to kick and run, and he was like, okay, I want them to be soccer players, not runners, because they have such a fascination with the ball and they want to be out there playing with it. And we really didn't grow up like with baseball or football or anything like that. I don't know, if I think my brother tried for one season and he hated it because he just wanted to kick the ball, he didn't want to throw it or anything. So it's kind of interesting. He just kind of let it come to us. And then obviously once he saw, okay, we're actually pretty good at this, he started to be like, okay, you need to get more into it, train and train and train. And that's kind of how it was. And it eventually led to, yeah, us being up in the mornings at 6 and running around and getting your laps in before you go to school and coming home and then doing your training session and then going to training with the team, which was usually with my dad or with somebody else or with my older brother, and then come home and maybe juggle a little bit before bed and wake up and do the whole thing the next morning. So, it was a routine for us.
This routine, especially the morning routine, was this all you personally wanted to do this, or your dad, or is just part of the whole team also did this?
No, no, the whole team didn't do this now. I mean, it
Okay.
was it was mostly my dad trying to train me and my
Okay.
brother, and eventually my sister on what it takes
What it
to
took. Yeah.
hopefully make it at this sport. And back then you didn't get it because you used to be angry. You have to get up and run in the morning, and as a 10-year-old you're like, why can't I just sleep in? And but now, I mean, I'm super thankful for it because it gave me a lot of discipline and taught me how to have routine and everything. So I mean, now I can't, if I'm on vacation now, and my wife can attest to this, I can't go a day without being like, all right, I need to run or do something. Like, I can't just sit here and do nothing. And that's all because of my dad. Credit to that, because he always drills it in my head. And now even when I don't want him in there, he's in there saying, go for a run or do something. So
yeah. That's good. He taught you a lot of things, especially the discipline at an early age, and now
yeah.
you appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in this business, you have to be disciplined because you can be out of it just as quickly as you're in it, and it's very hard to stay in it for a long time. The M.L.S, and I don't know what the rest of the leagues are in the United States, but 4 years is usually the average career for a player. So I'm on my 9th season now. I hope to go 7 or 8 or 9 more if I can. But that just comes with discipline. I mean, just have to take care of yourself constantly. So, and again, credited to him and all the crazy mornings that we had.
No, but that's good that he saw the potential in you and that he pushed you to do that, because, many fathers, parents in general, don't want to, especially you have the kid whining in the morning, he's 10 or 11. I don't want to get up. It's hard enough to just get them up for school, let alone earlier to go for runs.
It is. And I mean, it led to a lot of arguments because as you get older, you start to think, oh, okay, I know everything. And, I was always a know-it-all child. That's what, my parents used to call me because I thought I knew everything and didn't need to do this and only need to do these things. And, it led to arguments and eventually you have to realize there's a lesson there and there's a reason for it. And I think using my older brother was a good example because I just watched how much success he had and how far he was going and going and going. But at the same time, if you push too much, there's that line, right? Where then all of a sudden it doesn't become still a passion. It's more like it's like doing chores. Like, okay, I have to go do this. It's not something that's fun anymore. So, and I've gone through those stages even at my professional career where I'm like, do I really love it anymore? Because if I don't love it, I don't want to do it anymore. It's not worth all of the work that goes into it. But I still do, and I still find a lot of joy with everything I do. So the moment I don't, I won't play anymore, and that's kind of how it goes for most guys. So
did your brother ever go pro, or what happened with him?
So that's exactly kind of similar to what I was talking about. He basically had got to his finish point where he was kind of like, he could go pro, but he's basically been pushed to his limits. And he didn't know if it was gonna fulfill his life the way he thought it would, and he found that going into science and research would be more fulfilling for him, and so he ended up going into a biology degree and loved it, and he's very successful and works at Takeda Pharmaceuticals now. And so he's he still takes that same discipline with him, and I think he still loves the sport and everything, but it was more, do I want to go down the line of professional sports and all the politics that's involved in that? And I saw firsthand how it kind of tore him down, and I had to use that as a manual for what I was about to go through after. And I, was able to dodge a lot of things that he wasn't because he didn't have anybody ahead of him. So I kind of like to think that we're both on the journey now as a professional, even though it's just me, because he follows me around and watches the games and, still gives me tips all the time. And I mean, I listen to everything he says because he was such a good player and he sees the game so well. So even if he's not playing it, he's still, like a coach for me, both him and my dad. So yeah, it's, I guess you could say all three of us are they're kind of living vicariously through me with my professional journey. And so if I lose a game and I'm angry, they're both angry. And if I win, they're happy. And so, yeah. And then I kind of have my mom and sister who are there for support and kind of bring me back to life. So,
yeah. Brendan, I'm curious because, he's your older brother and he thought about possibly consider going pro. What are some things you learned from the business side of soccer, not obviously the sport itself, as far as what maybe not to do? You saw what happened with him.
Well, I mean, it's tough because like you said, it is a business. I mean, professional soccer, it's not a hobby. It's not even really a sport. I mean, it's a business. I mean, the owners are there to have players who are there to win titles, and that brings more money and revenue into the franchise. And so ultimately at the end of the day, you have to realize that it's not personal. It's not personal, it's just business. And so I think lessons to learn, especially when you're younger, is to realize that there is eventually a transition phase from academy to the professional ranks. And it's not just, I can show up and have a good time maybe with my friends. It's okay, if you don't make the bench or you don't make enough games, then you're not going to have a contract next year, which means you're out of a job. And it's it's serious because I mean, you have people that you're next to that have families and have kids and are fighting for, every year to have another ability to have, income for them from the franchise, from the soccer club,
Hmm.
where you're just maybe a 17-year-old kid and you're just there to, still enjoy the game and be there for learning experiences. So, it's something that the United States has to do a much better job with is development of younger players. It's gotten much better, but if you compare it to the rest of the world, with the European clubs and the South American culture, where the 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds are already some of the best players on the team, and they understand quickly they need to be producing, and that's what leads to, long-term contracts and everything. So, it's a lot of information, but I think one of the things that the United States can do a much better job with is that transition period. Because when my brother was coming up, I quickly realized that in the MLS, the young players are not taken care of. They are not people that are, taken under the shoulder. And here's how we're going to move you into the position that you're going to be someone important in the team. It was, you're a young guy, good for you. You're here, and you either need to earn your spot or you're not going to play. And I didn't like that mindset at all. And that's why I started my career in Sweden. I said, I'm not going to start in the MLS. I went right from college and leapfrogged the whole MLS and said, forget it. I'm not going to start here. And I went to Sweden, and, I started in the first division in Sweden over there, and where I knew that young players were valued. And they said, hey, we're going to play you. We're going to play you all the time. And you're going to learn from the experience of the game. We're not going to have to tell you everything, but you're going to get minutes. And it's just basically like dive in the water and start to swim, and you'll figure it out. So I love that because I'd already played 30 games by the time I was 20 years old, or 19 years old in the professional rank. And I know guys here that are 22, 23 that haven't even played 15 games yet. So it just
Hmm.
makes a world of experience, difference with the experience.
Before attending college, Brandon, you were already at a club team, right? So you were doing high school, I'm sure, with your high school team, or were you just a club team, or how was that?
So I went to 4 high schools in 4 years. Yep. Uh, just like I said, travel around a lot.
Okay. Due to
Following
soccer.
Following my
Okay.
brother. My brother and me went to high school together in Colorado. He had finished his senior year when I was a freshman.
Okay.
And then after that, he kind of started his path of whether he was going to choose to go as a professional or not, and kind of toured in Mexico and Germany, and found his way into the club Chivas USA in California. Chivas was the feeder club of Mexico, which for any soccer fans know that Chivas is like one of the biggest clubs in the world for soccer. So basically the United States started this feeder club for the non-Mexican side of things, or like the players that weren't as good or just weren't fit for the system of the Mexican style, to go up to this club in MLS, Chivas USA. And my brother was one of the first people of the club way back in 2010 or whatever it was, even earlier than that. And so I basically followed him there, and spent 2 or 3 years there. But between there, it was different high schools with online and transferring, because I could sometimes had to train in the mornings and then I had to train in the afternoons. So high school wasn't really a thing for me. It was kind of hard to do the normal schedule of a regular high schooler, right? So, but no, I never played high school soccer or anything.
Okay.
I just followed my brother around basically.
Okay. And then after that, you go to college where?
So basically what I'd watched from a lot of the academy players, and at the time Chivas USA had one of the top 3 academies in the United States for the under 18s, which is right
Hmm.
before you go to college. And so I was in a very good program, and I'd watched a lot of my friends go up and sign professional contracts for minimum money, and not really make much of it, and kind of rotting away on the bench, or not even on the bench. And so I was late in the process of the recruiting. I mean, I think recruiting is done what in mostly in the year before, and I was like in March or April or even May getting ready for the August season, and one of the coaches from Creighton University, which is one of the top 5 universities for soccer, came out and scouted me at one of the games and basically said, I know you don't want to go to college, but we have
Hmm.
one full scholarship if you want it at this school, Creighton. And I was like, what is that? Where is that? And I, once I'd done my research and gone and visited them, I kind of said, maybe I should get my education, because I mean, if I sign here, what's going to happen? I'm just going to,
Yeah.
be on minimum money and not play. And so I did, and I ended up going to Creighton University, and I was there for 2.5 years, and met my wife there. And besides that, there wasn't much to say. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's in Omaha, Nebraska, and it's a nice school, but there's not a lot to do, and it's not the most exciting college life, to say the least, over there.
Sure. So you did about 2.5 years there, and then you're like, okay, I need to go pro. I need to get out of here.
I do, and I said, okay, it's time, and I had made the decision. Okay, I need to take the next step. I had sat down with the coach there at the time, and he had basically not allowed me to go to Europe over the summer because he was afraid I wasn't going to come back. I had a few little interests here and there from some teams in Denmark, and so I told him, hey, I'd like to go and see how it goes. And
Sure.
And he basically said, no, I'm not going to let you, because if you go, I don't think you're going to come back, and we need you still for the season and everything. And kind of a typical selfish college coach. That's how most of them are. Not all of them, but most of them. And so then I met with my family, and I said, I got to do something here. And basically I decided I was going to transfer schools, because which is a big decision as a junior, to transfer for one more year, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 2.5, 3 years, one more year of school. And I basically got in touch with, through some help of some soccer people, the University of South Florida. And I met with a coach in Omaha who was the coach there at the time. And he knew exactly what I was trying to do. And he basically said, go to Europe and see what happens. And then just come play for 4 months with my team, and then go. And then, let's see what's possible. And that's what I did. So I transferred. I went to Denmark. And while I was in Denmark, Scandinavia is a very small area. So you have, the 3 or 4 countries that surround that area. And there's an American kid that's over here, so word gets out, and let's have him in. Let's look at him and let's see. Sure. It's not normal that there's an American over there. And so I went from Denmark to go to Norway. And at the time, Bob Bradley, who was the coach of the national team, he's now the coach of Toronto FC, who we just played last weekend, was the coach of a team there, very small club in Norway. He had me in. Another team in Norway said, okay, we want to see him. So I went there. So 2 weeks basically turned into 6 weeks. And then I was ready to come home, packed my bags to come home. And I get a call from a club in Sweden. They say, we'd love to see him. We heard about him. I said, all right, no problem. I'll go over there and, whatever. And so I went over there, and mind you, this is all on my own money. I mean, and then I'm in college. So I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to try. I mean, it's
Sure.
taking the train, and I'm sleeping wherever I can. And, hopefully the club can host me or whatever. But, I wind up in this small city called Örebro, which is about 2 hours outside of Stockholm. And it's a very historic club, one of the oldest clubs in Sweden. And it just clicks right away. It was amazing. I mean, from the first training session I was there, I got on really well with the players, and I was already an important figure, even as like the youngest guy there by far. I mean, most of the players were 27, 28, and I was 18, 17. I mean, I was really young. And I was there for 2 weeks, and I mean, I played a few friendly games, and they basically said, we want you now. We want to sign you right now. And I said, no, I made a promise to the coach. I got to go back. But I said, as soon as the season's over, I'm yours. I'll come back and sign him. And that's what happened. I finished my college season. I can remember it clearly now, that I finished my college season on like December 1st, and I signed December 2nd, the next day. They called, they had the contract ready. I signed it. I didn't even care what the money was or anything. I just said, I'll sign it, because I wanted to be there. And,
okay,
I loved the club, and I loved the opportunity that they were giving me. So that's what I did. And I went, and January 1, I moved to Sweden.
So when you signed, you didn't even have an agent or anything representing you there, or just?
I did. I had an agent that
Oh,
kind of
okay.
helped. I've had an agent since I was really young.
Okay.
He's not really my agent at the time, because you can't legally have an agent when you're an amateur, but sort of a family friend who was helping me. And obviously once I signed, he became my full-time agent. But no, we both kind of looked at each other and said, this is a great opportunity. I mean, there's not a lot of people that get to go to the Swedish first division out of college. So a lot of them go to like the 4th and 5th division. And here I am in like the Swedish Premier League, which is a big league for young players. And I was right in the mix of it. So was great.
Do you start Brendan immediately, or how does it work?
Yeah, so I mean, I was over there, and right away I was playing, and I remember the first few weeks I got there. I'll never forget it because it was the middle of January. If you know anything about Sweden and where it's located, it's very dark in the winter. It's very cold, and so
Yeah.
it's depressing. And I was kind of sitting there like, what have I done? I've just signed a 4-year contract here at
4 years. Okay.
this crazy city and country, and oh my gosh. And but as time went on, I got more and more comfortable, and yeah, we ended up making a few trips around Europe just for preseason, and was playing in all the games. And yeah, once the season started, I still had to again learn some valuable lessons, that just because you were good in some small preseason games doesn't mean you're going to be, necessarily the player right away in the things that matter in the real season. So I had to, kind of work my way into the starting lineup. But after, a few games, I found my spot, and started playing. And yeah, I never kind of looked back. I just kind of found my rhythm, and ended up staying in Sweden for 3 seasons, learned the language, and fell in love with the country, and made a lot of great friends. And
Same
um,
team?
yeah, same team. And I kind of made a promise to the club, because I had a few other clubs at the time right before I made my next transfer who were interested in me in Sweden. And I kind of said, I just am so in love with the club that I feel like I would betray the club if I went to some other club in Sweden, because it was such a storied club. And so that was kind of like my moment of fame in Sweden, because I told the fans I'm not going to play for another club in Sweden no matter what. And that made headlines, because it was like, okay, there's a few big clubs in Sweden who are like, this guy's stupid. If we came after him, why wouldn't he want to come play for our club? It's a much bigger club than the one I was at. But I was like, no, I'm committed to this club, and I want to be here. And again, a little bit naive, but I mean, I was happy that I said at the time, because it kind of made me a figure in the club for forever. That I said, hey, I'm not leaving. I want to
Yeah.
stay here, and as long as I can. If I leave, I want to go out of the country. I don't want. I mean, I want to just, if I'm in the country, I want to stay with these guys. So
So you do there 3 seasons, you said, right?
yeah.
And I know you mentioned you met your wife in college. So did she move with you in Sweden, or how does that work? Are you doing the long distance thing?
Yeah, so it was kind of tough, because once I had moved as well to South Florida, she stayed at Creighton, and at that moment it kind of became tough to stay together, because I was kind of pursuing my soccer career. And it's not easy when you're a 16 or 17-year-old kid, and you have a girlfriend, and you're basically telling her, I got to get up, I got to train, I got to do this, I can't go out. And I used to drive her nuts, because I used to tell her, I can't go out tonight, I can't do this, I got to go to bed by 8:30 or 9, and I got to get up the next. And it's college, it's college, and
Yeah.
they're like, come on, let's do something, let's go do something. And so I remember she used to go out with her friends, so I used to say, okay, I'll drive you there, I'll drop you off, and then I'll go home and I'll sleep. And then when you're done at 2 in the morning, I'll come back and I'll pick you up. And then I'll come back. That way she doesn't have to drive or anything. I said, but I'm not going to stay out. I'm going to sleep and do everything I can. So that's tough. That's tough when you're younger. And I think eventually we both kind of saw that I really needed to take some time to focus on myself and my professional career. And so we actually had stopped dating, and we were
Okay.
we were split up for like 4.5 years. We didn't see each other or anything. She kind of went on with her life, and I went on with mine. And I mean, because I was so driven with, I
Sure.
needed to make it as a professional. After watching what happened with my brother, I was kind of like, everything was kind of riding on me to make it. And I didn't want to create that kind of pressure, but I knew inside, I was like, a lot of people are relying on me to get there. And so, funny enough, when I was just finishing up with Sweden, and I was getting ready to make my move to Belgium, I kind of somehow fell in contact with her, and we kind of wrote a few messages back and forth, how everything is. And yeah, things started to start again. And she right away came and visited me in Belgium. I hadn't seen her in, like I said, 4.5 years. It's a long time not to see somebody. And then, I still tell her that she's crazy that she came all the way out to see me in Belgium, after not seeing me for such a long time. But yeah, without being corny, we hit it right off again, and kind of fell in love again. And that's when we, went as adults kind of into the full relationship, because, you're younger. It's not really a relationship, is it? I mean, it's just kind of like, you don't know what you're doing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and now we have a daughter, and we've been married. And so it's great. I mean, just the one woman of my life, even if there was some gap in between. So it worked out great.
That's great. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
So you moved to Belgium to what team?
So at the end of my time with Orbrew, it kind of become apparent that I needed to make the next step, and that was clear. And I think that there was a bunch of people even in the club who were saying, maybe it's time, you need to make the right transition. And my agent said the same thing. So there's a few clubs who are interested in you, obviously in Sweden, but you've kind of shot that down, so it's not really an option anymore. And so it's tough in Europe as an American because a lot of these teams have international rules where you can only have so many foreigners in each club, or how the country works, because they want their own to be the main figures of the league. They don't want a bunch of foreigners coming in,
Sure.
And so basically I had really my eyes on Holland. Holland was my big target that I had seen. I had a few clubs that was very interested, and I was eyeballing them, and I think everything would have been really good. And kind of at the last second, I had a club in Belgium, which is right next door to Holland, but it's a totally different world and it's a totally different league. Kind of come knocking and saying, "Hey, we're ready to take this guy, and we want to go full throttle with him." And so I remember the club came and visited me in Sweden after a game, and they kind of said, this is how it's going to work, and this is what we want to do. And I remember getting kind of the first real experience of what it's like to go through a major transfer in Europe, because you have your own contract details you need to work out, but it's really between the two clubs that's the difficult part, because they need to come to an agreement upon how much they think you're worth. And based off of that, if they can come to an agreement, then there's a settlement, there's a transfer fee. But I remember the club coming right away, and they offered me like a really low. They offered my club a really low number, and my club came back, and I was angry, and I was like, just take it, because then I can go and I can be on to the next thing. And they were like, no, like we've basically raised you as a professional. Now we're owed this money for the development. You have to also say you're worth much more than that yourself, so at the end, after basically like 6 weeks of fighting back and forth, they came to an agreement, and it came out to be a record transfer for both sides, the most expensive going out and going in. I mean, the most money they brought into the club. So it ended up working out really nicely for everybody. But it was a big learning lesson for me, because it was like, the first thing I was like, grab it. I remember calling the sporting director, and I was like, so angry. I was like, why aren't you taking the deal? This is a perfect chance for me to go in my development. And he was like, Brendan, you got to relax. This is how it works here. Like, this is not, we have to get our money back for what we're owed for all your development and what we think you're worth in the market. And I hung up the phone and I called my agent. I was so angry, and I was like, they're hindering me and they're not letting me go on. And obviously looking back now, I was like, this is amazing what they did in order to get the money they got and to allow me to make the transfer and everything. So I went to Kortrijk. Kortrijk is again a small club, a small city. I kind of find myself always in these little niche cities in Europe, but a very lovely and historic club that had a lot of good players that had come through it, and that was kind of their selling point for me to be there, and that I would be an important figure in the club and all these things. And so I ended up going, and I signed a 5-year deal this time with them. So again, a long-term deal. And I made tough part was the seasons are different in Scandinavia versus the central of Europe because of the weather. So I was just finishing up my season in Sweden, 3/4 of the way through it, when the Belgian season was just starting. So I basically went through a 3/4 of the season. I remember getting to Belgium. I trained one day. The next day they had the beginning of the season, and I started in the game the next day. And it was like, holy cow. And I have a whole new season in front of me. And so it was a big wake up call on how much more difficult the league was, and physical, and how much more pressure there is because it's a bigger league. And it was a big transition period for me in the first few weeks, for sure.
How was it? How was that transition? Did you change anything differently with your training style or anything like that?
No, I think it was more along the lines of just trying to adapt as quickly as I could to the style of play that was there. I didn't want to change too much about myself. It was more just like adapting a little bit and kind of understanding and being aware of, okay, this is a much more physical, and you have to run a lot more, and it just means more. I mean, there's just more at stake for each game. And so there was a little bit more of nervousness before games and anxiousness because of, what you felt. I think in the first, let's say 10 to 15 games, I was so much just like the new guy, and I was just in it and I was just going, that I didn't really realize it until I started kind of getting stuck in the culture of recognizing, okay, that these games are, on national TV, but not only national TV, they're being watched by other people in Europe. And, and there's some clubs in Belgium that are worldwide known clubs. And so I was like, holy cow, these are big games. And then I think I started to get a little bit in my head, realizing, okay, I'm playing in a good league, and it's not as easy as it feels like right now. And then you have that kind of period where you kind of get stuck and aren't in your best moments. You need to kind of refine yourself and regather. But I mean, I went through all that stuff in my first season there, kind of ups and downs and all over the place. And yeah, it was all part of the process.
Brendan, you mentioned they're stuck, and it just came to mind, in careers, whether professionally in sports and business, whatever it may be, there are periods of times where you do get stuck.
Yeah.
How would you personally deal with that?
It still happens to me now. I mean, I still have moments even now. I mean, this far into my career, where I have weeks or a month where I just can't figure out what to do, and I just don't feel like I'm playing correctly, or everything seems difficult. And I kind of just come back to what my dad always says. It's always about fundamentals and basics and keeping things simple. So I think when I look at it from kind of pulled back vision, I don't need to, overcomplicate things and realize, okay, first of all, it's just the game, and you don't have to get all worked up, and it's not, life and death, or it's actually life and death situations. And then in the moment when you are, if you're talking about people who are stuck in business and you can't seem to get things correct in business, it's the same in the game. I mean, I think it's just more along lines of taking one step at a time and being a little bit more composed and a little less, thinking about 10 steps in front of, what's to come. And I just simplified a lot of things. I remember just even going back to the training ground and just being like, let me just work on passing. Let me just work on dribbling. Let me just work on, like, as a professional, it should be something that's a lock. You should always be able to do that stuff no matter what. But if you get into these little, moments, then you need to just go back and kind of almost re-give yourself confidence that you know what you're doing, it kind of just to help the brain realize, hey, I belong here. I just need to tell myself I belong here. And the further I got into my career in Belgium, longer, I was there, it really became a mental game because, the season is so long. It's 11 months. It's not like here, which is like 9 months and 8.5 months. I mean, you get no time off. I never saw my family ever. I mean, Monique, my wife, she hadn't moved out there yet with me, so I was still alone a lot of the time. And it wears on you, man. I mean, it wears on you after you're doing the same thing for 5.5 years, 6 years, and you're just like, oh my goodness, always the same process over and over. It's tough. So the mental aspect was the most challenging for me. And there was some times where I really went through it, and I was like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. Not that I want to go home. It was more just, this is tough. I mean, it's not, I think a lot of times people think being a professional athlete is like the best thing ever. And there are great things about it, but it's a lot of things you don't see. And it's a very difficult job. I mean, you don't get to have any friends and fun and any of that stuff. I mean, not if you want to make it. I mean, there are people who go out and do all that stuff, but their careers don't last very long. So yeah, it started to wear on me. And I think once my wife arrived and was able to kind of help me see another side of life and get into it. I think that's another thing I would say. That's a really good tip that I learned is I was so engulfed with soccer. It was everything. And it's been my life for such a long time. I had no other stuff I had outside of soccer. And I think once that she was able to come and I was able to realize, holy cow, there's so many other things that I'm missing out on and that I can kind of take my head out of the game for a while and focus on other things. And that's kind of when I started getting really involved in all my hobbies, passions that I have today. I mean, just because, I mean, it was recognizing you need somebody to kind of pull you out, and
Yeah.
that's what she did.
How many seasons were you with the Belgium league?
I was also there for about 3.5 seasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then what, the M.L.S started coming around, or what happened?
Kind of was a funny story looking back. I mean, it wasn't funny at the time, but at the time I was kind of going through one of the most difficult things you can go through as a player, which is where you have a coach who brings you in, and the coach is really high and keen on you and wants to have you be as a main figure of the club. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the club decides we're not going to have this coach be here anymore. We're bringing another guy in. Well, another guy comes with a new agenda, and that means that players that were there are usually out and new players come in. Well, I was one of the guys that had the longest contract at the club. And looking back, that was a big mistake to sign, because looking at the history of the club, there was a lot of transition of coaches and players. I should have recognized, yeah, I probably shouldn't sign 5 years here, because I'm really locked in if a coach that I don't like or management I don't like comes in. And that's exactly what happened. I basically got stuck in a situation where a coach came in and didn't fancy me at all, and didn't think that I was the guy for him, and I went 11 months without even touching the field.
Wow.
Which is an eternity in soccer. I mean, that's like 10 years in business. I mean, it's a long time. And that's kind of at the point where I was like, okay, do I even want to keep doing this at this point? Because, I mean, I'm still being paid and everything to be at the club, and it's hard to show your face and be positive when you have no chance of playing because of a coach's agenda or whatever. But I was kind of right at the end of it. I was kind of like, calling my agent. I said, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, and maybe we can look at some loans at other places or whatever. And all of a sudden we found out that my wife was pregnant, and I was like, holy cow, this is another factor to add. And I was obviously very happy, but now we're farther away. And not too long after that, there was a Belgian coach who I had played against there in Belgium, who just became the head coach of DC United, Hernan Losada, who had just been let go by DC. And he just became the head coach. And it was big news in Belgium because it was the first time a Belgian coach had gone to the United States and become, head coach. And obviously in Belgium, it's such a small country, everybody knew about it. And it was all over the paper and everything. And he wasn't there more than like a day or two. And all of a sudden he calls me and he says, Brendan, I'd like you to come to DC. And I was like, he said, I know your situation. I know what you're going through at Kortrijk. I've watched you play, and I'd like you to be there. And I think you'll fit the system really well. And let's make it happen. I want to do it on a short-term basis to see if you like it. And if you want to stay, then you can sign permanently. I remember sitting there, and I sat there and I talked to my wife, and I said, I think I just got my out. I mean, I think I just got my, my golden ticket to be able to get out of here. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, yeah, again, you have the clubs that fight for everything, and it was a little bit of a drama, and it probably made it more difficult than they needed to make it. But I was able to get my loan. They call it a loan deal, and it worked out great. I was able to come back, last year with DC, and my wife had her baby in Arlington and Virginia Hospital Center, and my family is in Colorado, so they were able to come. Her family's in Minnesota, and it worked out great. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better, situation with that. So, and now I've found myself here at DC, and I love it here. I've been here for 18 months or so. Yeah, 18 months. And I mean, I'm here to stay until, it's time to go, or the club wants me to go.
Yeah, that's good. Back home to the States.
Yeah.
You just mentioned the coach change. And you mentioned earlier how it affected you in Belgium.
Yeah.
How about now?
Well, that's something that you have to look at. I mean, and that's something that I realized quickly when I went through that situation. I went through it once in Sweden, but it really wasn't a coaching change. It was kind of, one guy basically said, I'm at the end of my career, and I'm going to have another guy come and basically take over for me. And I knew both guys, so it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like a huge, okay, all the staff is out and a whole new staff is in, like Belgium was, which that happened 3 times. It wasn't just once. It happened 3 times while I was there. So it kind of became like, oh my gosh. When Hernan signed with the club, obviously I needed to know the background of the club and who the club, had before, and also kind of who were the other coaches that were coming. And I wanted to make sure that I got on with all those coaches in case, you know, that situation happened, because head coaches, you never know. I mean, they get hired and fired all the time, and it's a very tough business to be in for those guys. But I also seen that DC had a record of keeping coaches for a long period of time. So I figured, okay, if he comes, you know, I'd like to come, and hopefully I can, you know, see out his tenure and I can have my tenure there and everything. But I also knew in the back of my head, if anything ever went sideways, I was very happy to work with whoever was, you know, else was in the club at the time. And I got along with everyone else at the time. So obviously when they made the coaching change here, it wasn't nearly as difficult on me as it was in Belgium, because obviously then the assistant coach Chad took over, and I have known Chad for forever. Chad used to coach at Denver University. I used to go watch those games when I was 6 years old. So, I mean, I've known of him. I shouldn't say we've known each other. I've known of him, and I've known people who have worked with him for forever. And I think it was really nice that we were able to reconnect when I first came back to DC, and I kind of told him the whole story of, hey, I grew up watching you and all these things. And it was kind of a nice moment. But no, I mean, making sure I had all my check marks, you know, covered, to make sure all my boxes checked, so that I was like, okay, if anything ever happened, I would be okay.
That's good.
So,
You were mentioning earlier when you were in college about, you know, dropping off your girlfriend and picking her up later at the party. You know, and I know soccer has been basically your whole life since you were little.
yeah.
What would you say drives and motivates you, Brendan?
I think it's what the game gives back to me. I think it's one of those things that's similar in life. You know, if I've just started to learn that if I don't put everything into it, then, you know, it quickly comes back and it shows at the weekend, and I have a bad result and I have a bad game. And I like those life lessons. I obviously don't like living them, but I like the idea of them, that, okay, you know, if you don't work hard enough, you know, during the week, or you don't work hard enough for what you are passionate about, that it's not just gonna come to you, you know. And I think as a kid, it used to come to me because I was just miles ahead of the other kids. And most professional players will say that. They'll say, when I was a kid, I was the rock star. I was the one who did everything. But then you get here, and it's very hard to be a rock star in a league that has a lot of, you know, used to be rock stars in it. I mean, so everyone kind of expects it's just going to come. And I think that's what's so difficult about this line of business, is there's always someone who's better that's coming, and it's younger and fitter and is able to do more. And I mean, I see that now. I mean, I'm 27, but I'm watching 17-year-olds destroy 30-year-olds. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible, you know. And these kids are so good at such a young age, and they're the future of the sport. So how does a guy like me, who's hopefully coming to my prime here, you know, in the next year or two, then take it further and further? And I think that's what inspires me, is like, okay, can I beat the odds? Can I be the one who makes it to 35 and is still playing in a league that's super physical and is difficult and plays every 3 days, and, you know, those kind of things. I mean, I think last year was a big learning lesson for me, where I almost had the game taken away from me. Last year, I broke my hip. I broke my hip socket, which was a very major injury. I was supposed to have a major surgery, and it was going to keep me out for a year at least. I mean, it was a big incident that happened in the game. And without getting into details, I was able to come back from the whole injury in about 4 months, which was remarkable. But in that time span, it was really like, okay, is the game gone for me? And I think that was also one of the things that I was sitting there kind of pondering, because it's tough and it's lonely, and you think, okay, you know, let me just feel bad for myself. You know, is my life over? Is my career over? Those kind of things. And I was at peace with it if it was, but I knew if I was going to get back, if I had the chance to get back, oh man, I was going to come back, you know, and I wasn't going to be out again if I could do anything to help it. So I think that was kind of a reboot for my system, because I was about 7.5, 8 years into my career. So let's say I'm at my halfway point in my head. Okay, I've had a little bit of a bump, maybe a massive bump, but I've kind of been given a second chance here to keep going and refine the passion. And that was huge for me. I think that reignited myself. And I think coming into this season, I was like, holy cow, I'm just happy to play in every single game and happy to be involved. And I remember I was last weekend, or I could say on Sunday, we played against Toronto, and it was the same exact situation. We had played 11 games or 12 games in the season, and we played Toronto at home on a Saturday or a Sunday at 4 o'clock. It was warm, and yeah, I broke my hip in the game. And I was sitting there this Sunday right before the game started, and I thought to myself, holy cow, this is so surreal that a year later, it's the same exact situation. We're playing on the same time, the same team. How is it possible? And I remember I got subbed out at the 60th minute this game. I was, first of all, I was a little bit angry about the substitution. I was like, I don't usually get subbed out. I'm not happy about this. What's going on? But then I was sitting there, and I was sitting on the bench, and I'm thinking to myself, like, you idiot. Like, you're healthy. You just overcame, that kind of mental block in your head. And now you have the rest of the season and the rest of your career and life to go on, and your hip is fine. And so I walked away with a big smile on my face. We blew it at the end. We tied the game 2-2. We should have won, but I was the only one smiling. I was like, I'm fine. I'm healthy. My hip feels good. I get to keep playing. And so it's that, man. It's that it still brings me a lot of joy in my life. And like I said, when it doesn't, I'll stop. I'm not going to do anything I don't want to do. No chance. So that if that's next year or in 3 years or 10 years, whatever it be, I'll tell my wife and I'll say, that's it. I'm done. And I'm finished. I'll hang it up.
You mentioned your 7-8 years in your professional career, Brendan. What is it that you're most proud of thus far in your professional soccer career?
That in itself is a big accomplishment to make it that far. I think that's a big tally most people can't give themselves. I think just taking the different path. I wouldn't say it's the off-road path, because I didn't go to the crazy countries that some guys go to, but I just took the different path. And I think it's paid off, because I've come back into the league at a time where, players can be paid what they deserve. And I think, and I can be treated with respect for what I've done in my career, before, instead of just starting here and being comfortable being in the United States. I took a very uncomfortable path going to 2 different countries that notoriously don't have a lot of Americans that come there, and expect you to learn the language and you to learn their culture and to evolve to them, not the other way around. So I'm happy with that. And I think there's still maybe another move in my career that can find me at one more country besides the United States. But for now, I'm happy here. So.
That's good. Many people have that dream of becoming a professional athlete, whatever, soccer, basketball, football, whatever it may be. You're living your dream. You have that dream. What advice would you give someone, Brendan, who came to you and said, hey, I want to be a pro soccer player?
That's always it's always the most difficult. You can say the typical things, work hard and be disciplined, everything. I think honestly, you have to realize that it's very, very hard. It's very, very hard. And anyone that tells you it's not, it's not true. Even the best players that I've met, players that are supremely above most of the other players, tell you it's very difficult dealing with media and the politics of the sport. And, having to all of a sudden get traded and pick your life up and move somewhere else, and it affects your family. And when you have kids, it's even harder. Honestly, I would say to someone, if they loved it enough to go all in for it. That's what I did. I think, and I think I watched 2 sides, but I watched my brother go all in for it, but then not have the love anymore for the sport. And so I had to be clever about that. And going all in doesn't necessarily mean diving in and there's no tomorrow and that's it. And it's more like go in it with all your heart and go in with all positivity that you can. But realize there are still difficult, journey and path ahead that can come. For me, I don't know. I think it's just about what brings you the most joy, and I think the toughness of getting to this level is what brought me a lot of joy. So for a kid who says, "Oh, what does it take for me to make it as a professional, or what is it?" I'd say you have to love this sport. You have to love it. You have to love it, because it is at the end of the day a business for professional athletes. We're all kids at heart. I think a lot of the guys still love to just go and kick around and play. And we get angry in training sessions when it's like, come on, we didn't even play. We just did tactical stuff and we did formations and we did, different patterns, but we didn't even play or touch the ball. So there's still a kid inside of us. But every professional athlete that I've met NFL, NBA, all these guys, they all say the same thing. You have to absolutely love the sport, because if you don't love it, it will go away really fast. And so it's easy to say that to a kid who does love it, but you got to keep that love. You got to keep that inside of you. And like I said, go all in with the right mindset that, it's possible. Everything is possible with that type of work mentality. But it's not easy. It's not easy. No chance. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, with business, it's difficult. You got to work for it. And
every day.
We all every day, man. There's no off days. So
Brendan, are there any specific habits or skills that you feel have helped you throughout your life, whether on the personal side of things or in your professional soccer career?
Yes, I think that waking up with a positive mindset is super important. I woke up with a negative mindset for about 2 years in Belgium, and it wore me away. I watched my hair go away, and I watched myself wrinkle, and it aged me quick. I mean, I really felt like I was an older person just by how much stress I put on myself and all those things. And so now one of the first things I do every morning, if I don't do it here, I do it at the club, is jump into an ice bath or jump into a cold shower, because it boosts me with energy, and it gives me a feeling of being alive and realizing that, I should just be happy to be alive and doing what I'm doing, because it's very easy to just get up, go to training, do that. Don't even be aware of what you're doing. Come home, be with my wife, my child, go to sleep, do the same thing again, and do that over and over and over, because I've done it for however many years in a row. So now I think it's more, I like my morning routines. It's super important for me to have a good morning routine and feel like I'm awake and alive, and try to, even if I have to fake it, put a smile on or put some kind of positivity into my life, because it just makes my day a lot better, and it makes me feel a lot more productive and involved and present with what I'm doing with my work. Otherwise, it can be very mundane, and I can be not even really consciously there. I'm kind of just subconsciously running around, and I'm not even, I'm sure, with business, sometimes you're kind of just sitting there and you're like doing work, and like, what did I even do today? What did I accomplish? Versus if you're actually in it and you're involved and you're engaged in what you're doing. So I try to really focus on, it can't be every day, but I try to do that as much as I can.
Do you have any big challenge right now? And if so, what would that be?
Yeah, my biggest challenge I have right now is figuring out what my life is going to look like after the sport ends. I want to be on top of that. So I'm really trying to get involved in as much as I can with business, outside of soccer. And I think that's important for me to find the hobbies and things that I'm, enjoy, but also know that can bring me sources of income once my career is finished. So that's my big challenge that I continually work on every day. What's going to be my next stage, even if I know I don't have to do it for another 7 or 8 years, hopefully. If the time comes tomorrow, am I ready to make that transition?
What are you thinking of? I'm sure you probably have a few things in your head, and you mentioned hobbies. So,
well, I mean, my hobbies, my favorite thing, I would go every day if my wife would allow me, would be golfing. She's laughing at me now, but no, I think I'm just interested in learning to make your money work for you.
Sure.
Investments, real estate, all those kind of things, learning how to build my brand. I always think that's funny when I say that, because I tell my wife, I said, I don't have a brand. I'm nobody, and she's like, everybody has a brand. Everybody has a brand. You have to realize it. And I'm like, okay. So learning to build that and realizing I can bring something to the world, but it won't be in soccer. I can tell you that once my soccer career is finished, I'll be happy to hang that up and focus on something else. So I've put enough into the sport, and I'm happy to give back and help kids and stuff, but I won't be involved in the sport no more after that, for sure.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. Coming to an end here shortly, Brendan, what do you know now that you wish you would have known at the start of your professional soccer career?
Yeah, great question. I think similar to what I touched on earlier, that there is a life outside of soccer. And I think that makes your soccer life better, because you have that ability to refresh and step away and want to go back to training and want to go back to. It's funny, we always talk about as professionals that the time off is so important for us, because they think, oh, it's time off, they can go to vacation or go to have time with their family. No, it's actually because we need that time off to want to come back to training. it's kind of funny how all professionals are. You give them a 6-week break or 7-week break, and they're like, oh, it's the best. 7 weeks off. It's amazing. After 1 week, they're all like, I want to get back. I want to get back. That's all you need. So again, when I lose that feeling and I'm like, okay, I want 7 weeks, I want 52 weeks, then you'll know, okay, I don't want to go back. But I wish I would have known that. I mean, because I spent so much of my time when I was younger, and there's goods and bads of it, but just training and overdoing things. And I could have spent more time with family, and I could have spent more time just enjoying myself and living my life a little bit. But on the other side, those hours and hours and hours of work helped me to get to where I am today and maintain myself. So just the balance of life, and understanding that there is a life outside of soccer, but you still have to work hard for your job. I never want to be a guy that's working from 5 a.m. till 11 o'clock at night, and doing that every single day and not having a chance to be with my loved ones and stuff, or doing things I like, because that's not for me a life that I want to have. So
yeah. Did you have any big mentors? And if so, what did you learn from them?
I have a lot of mentors. Yeah, I have mentors in soccer. I have mentors in business, and they've all told me the same thing. They're like, listen, whatever you think you're at or whatever you're doing, you are way ahead of other 27-year-olds in life. You've done so much more than they have. And they always try to make me feel better about myself from that standpoint. But I always say, well, I want to be as far ahead as I can for my family, for my child, for all those things. So they constantly kind of reel me back and say, just easy. At 27, I was still out at clubs drinking and partying. I said, just relax a little bit and don't be so, hesitant or so tense, and just a little bit calm down. So no, they mentor me in smart business ideas, and telling me about saving money, and telling me about spending time with family, and what it takes to make it in different careers. And and then from the soccer aspect, I have the same conversations of what is it like when the transition comes, and is it hard, and those kind of things. So now I've had great people around me that have definitely helped me a lot.
That's good. Last question here, Brendan. When you're not busy with soccer, I know you mentioned golf here in business, but what do you like to do for fun in your free time?
I mean, now I have a 9-month-old baby, so I spend a lot of time with my baby, and we just moved into a house May 1st. So me and my wife have a million things to do with the house, and doing lawn work and getting things organized and all that stuff. So no, but I mean, other than that, I think we're exploring a new area. We're now out in South Riding, out in the South Riding area. So learning the neighborhood, being around, meeting people, it's meeting neighbors. I mean, it's just kind of boring stuff, but for me, that's exciting because I never did that before. I never had that opportunity to have that kind of stuff in my life. So now you hear my baby crying. So no, it's every day is at home and just doing stuff with them. So my 2 little best friends. Yeah.
That's good. By the way, how are you liking the DC metro area? I know you've been here for almost a year and a half or so, just under 2.
Yeah. No, we love it. We absolutely love it. I mean, it's a great place. It's always something to do. It's thriving, and I could see us staying here for a long time. I mean, we always talked about where we're going to go afterward, both from the Midwest, Minnesota and Colorado, but
sure,
we don't want to go back there. It's too cold. And so we're looking at, different options, but we'd be happy to stay here. It's great. You get kind of all different kind of cultures, and we love that diversity. I grew up basically playing only with Mexican soccer players. So I was like learning Spanish, and I love the Mexican culture. My wife is Mexican. And so like, I loved that. But then when I went to these other countries, it was like Sweden, it was only Swedish. Belgium, it was like Belgian and French. That was it. There was not a lot of other cultures. And then now it's like in DC area, you have all the South American, European, I mean, all the African cultures, the Mexican culture. It's the best for me. It's the best. So, I mean, the diversity is I think it's second to none, honestly. I don't know any places that are more diverse than the DMV area. Maybe you could tell me otherwise. But I mean, even when I was in Denver, it was kind of like you'd have 1 or 2 other major ethnicities, or nationalities, but it was not like this. So
do you know any other languages besides English?
So Swedish, I learned Swedish when I was there. I obviously haven't spoken Swedish in a while, but I mean, I could still hold my own if I needed to.
Okay.
Spanish has drifted away. I used to speak Spanish pretty well when I was younger because I only played with the Hispanics at Chivas.
Yeah.
And then I know a little bit of French from Belgium and a little bit of Dutch, but I'd say English, Swedish, and very, very elementary Spanish. Those are my 2 that I could say were my languages.
Awesome. Brendan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really
Thanks, man. I
appreciate you
appreciate
taking
it.
the time.
No, it was awesome.
It was
I knew
awesome.
it was going to be a good time. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, buddy.
Take care.
You too.